Good morning, dear participants and partakers. I once again delightfully welcome you to the fourth day of International Faculty Development Program organized by the Department of Languages under the aegis of Human Resource Development Center, Integral University. So far, our distinguished speakers crystallized the implications and attainability of sustainability through education, management, and societal setup. Adding to this sustenance of sustainability, the focus of today's lecture will be on the relevance and importance of literary scholarship and scrutiny for climate change debate. Our noted speaker of today is an academician par excellence who has a dynamic contribution to the corpus of environment and sustenance. Professor Dulal Halder is from University of Delhi. Sir has more than 20 years of teaching experience and has authored credible books on language, literature, and criticism. Some of Sir's notable works include Comparative Literature and Translation, Debates over Emancipation of Women, Cultural Heritage and Management, Literature and Social History, Literary Criticism and Theory, among others. Sir has various research papers in national and international journals to his credit. Sir academic and administrative endeavors are significantly inspiring. Dear Sir, I invite you to address the session and let our participants share your sharp as a tack lecture. Over to you, sir.
Thank you, Vanya, very much. Okay, when Vanya approached me to be a part of this FDP on literature, society, thought, and effort towards sustainable development, so I was in a fix to a certain extent because I didn't know what topic to start with. So incidentally, at that point of time, I was reading a particular book by Amitav Ghosh. The name of the book is The Living Mountain. It's a very, very thin book, in the sense it's not even a complete novel. It is just like a short story. So, like, this is the book that I was reading, Amitav Ghosh, The Living Mountain. So, as I was reading this book, so I thought, why not speak on Amitav Ghosh in the context of sustainability? And as I was dealing with this, I was got reminded of that most of the recent works of Amitav Ghosh actually tries to deal with this notion of sustainability, notion of environment, notion of myth. Now, how myth can be used, or how the exploration of the myth is necessary in understanding the environmental sustainability. And that is how I thought about trying to create a topic, as the broad topic which is there, where I talking about environmental sustainability with mythical overtones, a study of Amitav Ghosh's recent works. Now, obviously, when we talk about recent works, the most recent work, obviously, as we all know, is the living mountain. Now, before that, the work that Amitav Ghosh has written was, or published, has been the Jungle Dama, which is again a very short work, a poetic novel about a particular myth of Born Bibi, which is a goddess of the Sundarban. Sundarban, all of you know, is the mangrove forest at the Bangladesh and India border, which touches the Bay of Bengal. So there, the Sundarban Delta, there is a particular mythology which is there of Born Bibi, which is the goddess of the Sundarban, or goddess of the forest. So based on that particular forest, particular idea of a particular myth of the Born Bibi, or the forest goddess, the whole of that particular short novel, the Jungle Nama, is based on. Now, as you try to read this, you will figure out that this notion of Sundarban, or the exploration of Sundarban, is something that Amitabh Ghosh has not been doing only in this, but has been doing from much earlier. Because in 2004, the novel that was published by Amitabh Ghosh, the Hungry Tide, is the exploration of the environmentalism, or the environmental aspects of the Sundarban Delta. And then again, a sequel to that particular novel, not exactly a sequel, but some kind of exploration of the same thing with certain characters from Hungry Tide that are being taken in the context of Sundarban is being done in the next novel that he Amitav Ghosh talks about is Gun Island, where instead of exploring the myth of Bon Bibi, where Amitabh Ghosh is exploring primarily the myth of Manasa Devi, Manasa, Manasa Devi. Manasa Devi is a very popular goddess in Bengal. She is the goddess of snakes. So all mostly you'll find out wherever there is the rural areas everywhere in the rural areas, this goddess of snake Mansa Devi is being worshipped. And once a year there is a grand celebration of Mansa Devi, and that is being done primarily to satisfy the goddess, so that the boon of the goddess is there and nobody is being killed because of the snakes. Now in this particular story, the Gun Island, if you take this story, and I find out this particular novel, the Gun Island, very very fascinating, because the novel starts with this myth of Mansa Devi, and then goes into the history of this myth, and figured out that there is someone called explorer, a businessman in much back in the 11th century, whose name was Bonduki Saudagar. Banduki is a sense of gun, and Saudagar, you all know that is a businessman. So a businessman with guns, a businessman who deals with guns. And as we figure out, as we explore this myth of Banduki Saudagar, we figure out that somewhere it takes us away from Sundarban Delta to Venice, because that particular businessman had that explorer Bondugi Saudagar had traveled from Sundarban till Venice for the purpose of his business. First, second is that as he was someone who was victimized by Mansa Devi, and as he was someone who was trying to go against Mansa Devi, so therefore he is trying to go away from the Sundarban Delta to save himself from Mansa Devi. And as he's going there to Venice, even in Venice, you find out he explored certain things where he could not get out of the evil effect of Mansa Devi. So, and as we go there, what happens is this is the person, the narrator, as he starts his journey, he comes to from Los Angeles, he comes to Calcutta. In Calcutta, he figures out about the Mansa Devi thing, and then he starts exploring this particular myth. And as he carries on exploring the particular myth, he reaches Venice. And in Venice, when he experiences his own thing, he figures out that somehow his own experience of the nature of the Mansa Devi, like he experienced a kind of a poisonous spider in Venice, and that exploration with that explosion of the poisonous spider and the snakes in Sundarban, to find out he is able to figure out what are the kind of environmental disasters that human beings have been going through. So when we read the recent works of Amitav Ghosh, we find out there are three factors which are, or at least two factors which are very, very significant. One is that Amitav Ghosh is taking up the myths which are there in the prevalent in the Bengal, or moreover in the Sundarban Delta, trying to explain those myths, trying to understand those myths, trying to figure out the mythical overtones of this, trying to figure out the significance of this myth in our present day life. And then at the same time, through this exploration, when Amitabh is trying to do so, he is trying to talk in terms of how the myth, all this myth talks about sustainability or the other in certain aspects, which make these myths also very very significant in the present context, because we all know that in the present context in which we are living, it is, we are all the time being threatened, all the time being threatened by environmental disaster. Like today in Delhi, the morning, as I get up in the morning, I try to open Google News, and I figure out that our chief minister is asking all the people living in the Yamuna, near the Yamuna river, to evacuate as soon as possible. So we find out this kind of environmental disaster is happening every day all around. We sometimes we get some certain news from Himachal, where there is some cloudburst, sometimes from somewhere else, sometimes from Bombay, the excessive rain, sometimes some problem of heat. Every time we are always hearing about some kind of environmental disaster or which is being done. Like today morning again, there's some news I was reading where I figured out that because of the concretization that is happening in Himachal, it is affecting the environment very much. So we carry on with supposedly with our developmental works without thinking without thinking about its environmental impact, and because of which we sometimes bring in certain kind of disaster to us which could easily have been averted. So, to talk about all these things from a literary perspective, I figure out that Amitav Ghosh's works, recent works, have been very, very significant because they make us aware of the kind of things that we have been doing. This is one aspect. The second aspect is like, as a third world, as a third world citizen, when I am trying to when I try to look at this notion of environmental sustainability, I figured out that most of us are not so much, though we somehow participate in this disastrous process of trying to master the environment and therefore create disaster on us. But the point is that this has been a Western modernist idea to to moreover master nature, and in the process trying to bring about certain problems for mankind, and not only for the mankind but for the whole of ecology. We have to remember that when we talk about ecology, which was like at one point of time the ecological, or what we talk today talk in terms of very much in terms of eco-criticism. At one point of time, eco-criticism was about ecological innocence. So when we try to look at nature, we try to exploit nature, we try to get things from nature, and we thought we should care about nature. Then came a time which was about ecological affluence. So we tried to become affluent at the cost of ecology, at the cost of nature, and we thought, and there the important thing is that we as human beings thought that we are the master of nature, we are the master of the trees, we are the master of environment, we are the master of nature, and we should be using them, utilizing them for our own purposes, disregarding the fact how it affects other creatures. So this particular aspect also was at a point of time when we talking about ecological affluence. And then from 1972, there is a Norwegian ecologist who comes up and talks in terms of deep ecology, where she uses the term biospheric egalitarianism. What is this? This is primarily about not trying to give preference to human beings over animals or the plant world, but trying to think in terms of an egalitarian society where animals, trees, and all other creatures of nature are also as important as human beings. And this is something which, again, is being emphasized in activism by a Brazilian labor organizer whose name is Chico Mendes, where he talks about ecology of justice. Because when you talk about justice, we primarily think in terms of justice for human beings. We don't think in terms of justice of animals. We don't think in justice for the environment. We merely think in justice in terms of justice for mankind. And therefore this Chica Mendes tries to come up with the slogan ecology of justice, which is justice not only for human beings but also for all kind of creatures in this particular world, justice also for the environment. नाउ somebody may say कि इस दुनिया में तो इंसानों को जस्टिस नहीं मिलता, एनिमल का जस्टिस कहाँ से होगा, ट्रीज का जस्टिस, एनवायरनमेंट का जस्टिस कहाँ से होगा. Now obviously to find out when we incorporate ecology of justice, we also would include the justice for the poor, because the poor are the victimized lot in this environmental debate, in the environmental sustainability, because it is the affluent ones who are taking the advantage from nature and the poor ones who are the victimized lot. So when one talks about ecology of justice, it is not only a justice for the the whole of the environment or all the creatures, it is not just having a certain kind of a prevalence of human beings over other creatures, but it's also about justice for all, each and every human being, which also includes the marginalized groups, which also includes the most poor. So this, with this particular kind of focus of environmental justice, that we find out that Amitav Ghosh also is trying to, moreover, trying to deal in his narrative, where he is trying to show how, because of the Western dominance, because of the Western hegemony, how the third world countries have been, how the third world countries have been in a certain way being exploited, utilized, and how they are not able to gain certain things from of their own, gain advantage of their own resources, and because of which they are suffering much more than their Western counterpart. So, like to give you an example, there's a novel which came out in 2018. The name of the novel is Nutmeg's Curse. I think many of you probably have heard about, sorry, this is a novel which came out in 2021. The Nutmeg's Curse. It is about a particular island called Banda Island. Banda Island is in Java. Is a small volcanic island where you find a nutmeg. This island is known for the nutmegs. So in the 16th and 17th century, when Europe was looking for spices, and these people, the Europeans, came there to Banda Island, colonized the whole of the island specifically for the purpose of getting the nutmeg, the spice. And after that, it talks about, the novel talks in terms of how the whole of the island, Banda Island, is not only being colonized, but how the inhabitants of the island, they are mostly exterminated or they are driven away from the island. How the Western people, they took control of the island only for the systematic exploitation of the natural environment, which could grow this particular plant called nutmeg, from where we get the spices. So through this particular story, through this particular novel, The Nutmeg's Curse, Amitav Ghosh is showing the systematic exploitation of human life and natural environment, and how that has been one of the killing things that the Western colonialism had been doing from the 16th and 17th century. The same thing is being repeated in this particular novel, which I am talking about, which has started with a living mountain, which is very thin novel of 20-25 pages. It's not a novel, as I told you, it's a short story. I'll tell you in short what this particular story deals with. This story starts with a particular tribe who are living in the Himalayas, on the Himalayas, and there is a particular mountain which is known as the Mahaparvat, or the big mountain. Uh, so this mountain, the people, this tribe which is living there, they live on the valley of this mountain, and they think, or they revere the mountain in such a way that they never try to trek up to the mountain, because they think that the mountain is something which is sacred, and therefore they should not tread up in the mountain. Now what happens is, then this mountain gives them their source of sustenance, everything that they have, whether it is the kind of trees, the fruits, and honey and other things, everything that is there in this valley is because of this island, and these people revere this island too much. And what happens, once in a year you find, and outsiders are not allowed in the valley. So, and in the in what happens is, once in a year for 1 week, the business people from outside, the all over the world, they come there near the valley, and in the market, these people, this particular tribe, they sell everything about the forest products that they get from the mountain. They sell everything for the sustenance. So this is how it had been carrying on for generations. And there are certain people, certain women in this particular village, those who are known as adepts. The adepts are the dancers. So when they dance, there is certain vibration in the land when they dance, which is supposedly the voice of the mountain. And through the feet of these dancers could communicate with the mountain. So this, it is a whole kind of a magic realist experience which is being talked about. Now this kind of magic realist element has been a prevalent thing in almost all recent novels of Amitav Ghosh. Now interestingly, what happens suddenly, there is a group of people, strangers, those who come there to this mountain, and they come there and they name themselves as anthropoi, Anthropoi, anthropoi. They come there and they talk to this tribal people and figure out that it is immensely rich area, naturally rich area. So they say that they will come back and they will try to climb the mountain. So this people from the tribe, that the tribal people, they get scared of them, but they think that they will defend. So but 2 3 years passes by and the strangers, the anthropoid, never come back. So after 2 3 years, suddenly they find out there is certain kind of disturbance, and somebody says that this anthropoid people are coming. So as they come, you find out they start climbing the mountain, and you find that anthropoi are somebody, they those are martially so powerful that this tribal people, they could not stop them. So they come there, they try to climb the mountain and things like that they are doing, and suddenly we do find out this anthropoi, the tribal people, those who are termed as Varbaroi, they are being termed as Varbaroi by the anthropoi. So these Varbaroi people, they figure out that as they climb the mountain, there is nothing that is happening. So, and probably they have been thinking about the sacredness of the mountain in such a way that which is biased. They probably should not have done so. So they this Varbarois, these tribal people now becomes the coolies and other people, those are helping the anthropoids to climb the mountain. But as this is happening, this strange, the outsiders, the anthropoids, they figured out that probably this mountain doesn't have the capacity. This huge mountain doesn't have the capacity to bear any more weight, and therefore it was thought mythically that this mountain should not be climbed. So when this is happening, to find out that they could sense that there is a disaster, there is a natural disaster, environmental disaster that is coming up. So at that point of time, when the anthropoi realized from their scientific temperament, from their scientific study, that this mountain is something which can give us the richness of its forest products, but at the same time it cannot sustain human involvement in it. So they come back, but you find that by that time, everything, the Varbaroi, Anthropoi, both of them are in a problematic status, and because of which you find out they could not understand how to deal with this situation. So at that point and by this time, as the Anthropoi, the Varbaroi, the tribal people, as they had been in too much involved in the ways of the outsiders, they have forgotten their own dance, they have forgotten their own culture, as it happens in case of most of the colonial societies. That colonial societies, in their emphasis on mastering, or in their emphasis on copying the West, copying the colonizer, they tend to forget their own language, they tend to forget their own culture, they tend to be disrespectful of their own culture, and there is a kind of amnesia that happens. And because of that amnesia, you find out they, when they try to go back to their own culture, you find it becomes a problematic thing for them. So at that point of time, these tribal people, they also suffer from similar kind of amnesia, because of which neither can they take up the culture of the anthropoi, which they figured out by this point of time is not something that they should have taken up, but they cannot at the same time go back to the sacredness of the mountain, because they have already been forgetful of that. So in it, they are in a fix. At that point of time, what happens is they figure out this tribal people, the Varbarois, figure out that there is one old lady who was once upon a time a dancer, who is also, as I told you, that the dancer called adepts. So there is one adept, one old lady who still has certain notions about certain idea about those dance, and she can probably do the dance and communicate with the with the mountain and do the worship. So what happens is that she is being coaxed by all to perform the dance, and when she tries to perform the dance again, you find out she is able to revive within her that particular skill of trying to communicate and revere the mountain, and gradually a change starts happening. And there this narrative ends, where the narrative says that now both the anthropoi and the barbaroi are in the similar kind of a state, and the short narrative ends. Now, this narrative, I figured out, is a very significant narrative, and a narrative about ecological sustenance, about sustainability, because we in we have been like we with our own sense of environment, with our sense of sustainability, had been living a life where we were cohabiting with nature. So it is not in Indian culture to try to think in terms of mastering the nature, trying to think in terms of utilizing or exploiting nature. We have been living with nature as a part of nature, and we revere nature, we worship nature. But what happens is, because of the kind of colonial dominance, because of this notion about trying to master nature and trying to exploit nature that the Western concept has brought to us, so what happens is that we had been blindly copying the West in those terms, and as we did so, we probably have brought into ours a kind of a developmental project where we have disregarded the environmental impact of those developmental projects. We need to get back to the sustainable things that we have been doing with nature, that we have been doing to ourselves. And as we bring that in, probably we can be an answer to the Western notion of development, because our notion of development is not something which can be a blind copy of the West. Probably West now also itself is realizing and is taking up the sustainability measure in a much more significant way than anybody else. But their sustainability is at the cost of us, at the cost of the underdeveloped and the developing world. So we need to probably come together and try to create a kind of a policy where we take the sustainability to be the most significant factor in our own development. Until the time we do so, we obviously will be carrying on with certain development, mindless development projects, which will be much more detrimental for us than be thinking in terms of our own development. Now, in this particular context, I was reading a particular book by Ramachandra Guha. I think many of you are aware of this particular book. It's a book called Environmentalism: A Global History. It's a book which is published long back, which is published around 2000. There, we find out there's a phrase that Ramachandra Guha uses, and this is not a phrase that Ramachandra Guha creates by his own. This is a phrase that is being used for the first time by Patrick Geddes. The name of the phrase is carboniferous capitalism. Like, we always, when you think in terms of capitalism, we try to think in terms of capitalism than higher capitalism. The postmodernism is moreover talked about in terms of higher capitalism. But after that, the phrase which we should be considering when we're talking about sustainability is the carboniferous capitalism, where we find out the amount of carbon we are creating is because of the capitalistic trend and consumerist trend that we have. So the kind that the carbon emission that we are doing, that should be taken as a parameter of deciding what kind of capitalism we are in, and what are the things that we should be doing to make our carbon emissions lesser. Now, obviously, as a literature student, we don't get into, or as part of literary studies, we don't get into the notion of carbon emission. We don't get into the notion of the pollution in terms of how certain things are polluting certain things, and things like that. We only talk in terms of the impact of the pollution on us, on human beings. And as literature is a representation of everyday reality. And therefore, gradually, we are seeing that in most writings, certain way or the other, this ecological impact of carboniferous capitalism is showing its impact. And as it is showing its impact, to find out that authors are moreover trying to make us worried about this particular fact, that we have been creating a kind of a facade of development around us without realizing that this facade of development will is actually like a balloon which can burst any day. And as it will burst, obviously we will all be a victim of it. So many authors have been trying to educate us about this particular facet of carboniferous capitalism. And I think Amitav Ghosh is one of the primemost one trying to do so, because living with nature is something that our culture has been upholding for a time. Until from the 19th century onwards, we have not been able to do so because of the mindless industrial and other development that we have been doing. So we need to get back. We need to get back to our roots. We need to get back to this notion of deep ecology. We need to get back to the notion of ecology of justice. And till the time we don't get into all this, we'll figure out that we'll never be able to live up to this particular project of ecological sustainability or environmental sustainability. This is one aspect. The second aspect, which again I think to be significant, is which again Amitav Ghosh deals with this in a much more detailed way. And for this, what I'll do is which is the idea of mass migration. To find out in the recent decades or recent, not decades, centuries, in last 2 centuries, there have been lot of migration of people from one country to other. Now, migration for the purpose of business is something else. Like one or two people traveling to a particular country doing business, they're coming back, is something else. But migration for the mass migration is something which has not happened um, uh, before 2000 century, 200 two centuries. So there you find out, and this also has a particular pattern, the mass migration. Why did migration happen? Now, migration at one point of time, migration happened because we were not we didn't settle in one place. That is far far back. But in recent times, you find out again migration happened because of colonial impact, because of colonialism. And okay, let me read out a particular lines from this particular novel, Ghana Island, by Amitav Ghosh, and then from that point of view, think in terms of what is the implication of this migration. Now, Amitav Ghosh writes in Gun Island, the European imperial powers, in the service of commerce, transported people between continents on an almost unimaginable scale, ultimately changing the demographic profile of the entire planet. But even they were repopulating other continents, they had always tried to preserve the whiteness of their metropolitan territories in Europe. So, what Amitav Ghosh is trying to talk about, two ideas here. One idea is that this mass migration or repopulation of one continent over other is something that starts with European imperial power, European imperial project, whether it is the Girmitias traveling from India to different parts of the world, whether it's South Africa, whether it's Fiji, whether it's West Indies, things like that, or whether it is the slaves being taken from Africa to US, or whether it is because of the colonial impact in that from the Banda Island, the inhabitants of the Banda Island in this novel, The Nutmeg's Curse, the inhabitants of the Banda Islands were being driven out of the islands. So this kind of repopulation of one continent over another is something that is started with the European imperial project. Or suppose if we think in terms of Australia, Australia being the land of the the tribal people there, and how it is being taken over by the whites, and then gradually the Asians also went there. So this kind of repopulation of a particular island or a particular continent has been one of the significant project of the imperial power, because that is, by doing so, the Europeans try to make use of human resource and the environmental resource to their own advantage. So this is one aspect, that mass migration is something that has been a project of the imperialist Europe. But at the same time, what is significant that Ghosh is trying to point out is that even though they were trying to repopulate different continents for their own economic purposes, they didn't want their own continent to be repopulated. So they try to stop the migration to their own countries. So it is saying to preserve the whiteness of their own metropolitan territories in Europe. So they try to keep Europe white and did not allow much of migration within Europe to Europe, whereas they thought that they can take others to some other continents. So this problem is this has become a major problem. Now, the Gun Island in this particular novel, you find out, as I told you a brief about this novel, what this novel dealing with Mansa Devi deals with, the narrator traveling from Sundarban to Venice because he traces the elements of the myth of the Mansa Devi and Bondagi Sadaka to Venice. So when he reaches there, when he is exploring Venice, he figures out that there is a like significant number of Bengali people staying in Venice, and he figure out primarily they are from the Sundarban area, and they are primarily from either from the Sundarban area in India or in Bangladesh, because Sundarban is also extended into Bangladesh. So from this part, from Bangladesh and India Sundarban area, many people are there in Venice. And we find out these people, they try to get into Venice through illegal means. So many of people are going to go there illegal means, and they primarily do the work of labor there. They are laborers there doing menial jobs, whether working in a restaurant or doing the construction business or working on the roads. And they, moreover, as they are doing this kind of a job, to find out their life is all the time threatened. So what happens is, there are two young guys from the Sundarban area, one from India and one from Bangladesh. Those who become friends, and then they are trying to go to Venice. So it talks about their journey to Venice. These two illegal immigrants, their journey to Venice, and as they try to go there, you find out one of them reaches Venice and one of them is left behind. So this arduous journey that is being talked about, and how the illegal migrancy and this whole business of illegal migrancy works. But that is not important, very much important. What is important is that when one of them reaches there in the Venice, and the narrator meets him and figures out that there is another boat full of these migrants, those who are coming, full of these, not migrants, the term that is being used in the novel are refugees. These refugees, they are trying to come from with a blue boat from Egypt to Italy and to Venice, and you find out that how the whole of the Venetian authority is trying to stop this blue boat from getting into Venice. So what happens is, at that point of time, there is a Bangladeshi, these people, the Bengali group, the Indians and Bangladeshis living there in Venice. They then try to hire a ship, and then, along with certain journalists, along with this particular narrator and two of the narrator's friend, those who are also very influential persons in a person in Venice. One of them is a university professor. So all of them in this particular ship, they go to the place where the whole of the Italian navy is waiting to stop this blue boat from coming in. And the instruction from the Italian government is that you should stop this blue boat from getting into Italy if there is no miracle as such. So what is being said, if there is any miracle, then it can happen, then you can let this boat enter, but otherwise you should not. But anyway, so ultimately what happens is that as these people gather there in the sea, and as they see the blue boat approaching, to find out that there is an unusual kind of a environmental thing happening. What happens is that was also the time when the birds are migrating, Okay, so as the birds are migrating, so you find out about 2 million birds from the ship. Suddenly they figure out, they suddenly they are as if the cloud is flying. So they've later figured out it is not the cloud flying. About 2 million birds, about 2 million birds are flying towards that particular place and moving from there, and therefore it is seeming like a cloud is which is on air. At the same time, dolphins are trying to migrate. The river dolphins and the other dolphins, they are trying to migrate. And as they are trying to migrate, to find out that there is also another kind of a scene that is happening in the water. So over the sky, there is the birds migrating. On the ground, on the sea, there is the dolphins migrating. And in between, there is a blue boat trying to enter Venice, and it being stopped by, and people are trying to, the government authority with a naval ship is trying to stop the blue boat from entering into Venice. So this kind of setup is being created. Now what happens is, from this point of view, the thing that is being talked about, because whenever you're talking about migrancy, whether you, and along with this you talk in terms of refugee, we also bring in the notion of nation. So how these dividing lines in terms of nation, how these borders are being created, and because of these man-made borders, the notion of refugee status comes into being, which is missing in the natural world. Whether it is the birds migrating, whether it is dolphins migrating, there is no stoppage for them. But for humans, there is a stoppage. The first thing that is there is that we, nation, is all about being rooted to a particular place. Now this idea of migration is something that has been implanted into us by the westerners when they try to make certain economic benefit of for themselves at the cost of repopulating continent, at the cost of other continents. And now when people are trying to migrate for whatever purposes, whether it is for an educational purpose, whether it is for a professional purpose, whether it's for business purpose, or whether for any political crisis or something else, we do find out what is being done is that you try to stop one person from going from one place to another, or migrating from one place to another, in terms of thinking in terms of they being refugees, or they being Rohingyas, or they being outsiders, or they be strangers. And as you do so, then you find out that you are trying to create a kind of a divide in terms of you being not belonging to this particular nation or this particular community, and therefore you are being not being invited into this particular nation, or you are being invited because of this. Now because this kind of a discriminatory practice that has been created, first they initiated the repopulating process, and now they try to stop the repopulating process because they have to preserve their own whiteness, they have to preserve their own culture. Now this notion of preserving the culture itself is a problematic one, because, like I'll quote Swami Vivekananda here. Swami Vivekananda once said that if you are trying to, if a culture is something which is not interacting with any other culture, it is a dead culture, because you stop development, because you cannot progress further. The more we interact with other culture, the more the progress happens. The more you imbibe from other culture, trying to think in terms of how you can progress. But when you try to preserve the supposed sacred entity of a particular culture, what happens is that you tend to create a death or a doom for us. So this is one way of looking at it. But on the other side, there is certain sacredness of a culture which one right should be preserving, which can be talked about as a myth, as we have seen in this particular novel, The Living Mountain, where the myth of the sacredness of the Mahaparvat need to be preserved, because by preserving that, you are preserving the nature, we are preserving the ecology. But at the same time, to find out, so we have to make a selective assimilation, like what to imbibe from others and what not to imbibe, what to preserve. And this is something which is very significant from the Indian or the post-colonial context, because it is not that we can discard the West altogether. We cannot discard the West, because we have been living with the West for 200 years because of the colonial involvement. And today when we think of our own context, at one point of time we need to think in terms of preservation of our own culture, preservation of our own heritage, preservation of the environment of our nation and also of the whole of the world, and yet at the same time trying to take certain things from the west of which may be of importance to us in our own development process. And there we find out the selective assimilation is probably the norm by which we should be thinking in terms of what to preserve of our own culture and what to imbibe from the other cultures. And therefore, and this is a term that I selective assimilation. This is again a term that is being used by one of our most famous authors, Anant Murthy. You or Anant Murthy had used this term, selective assimilation. So I think that selective assimilation is the key to sustainable development. Whether what aspects of our heritage, what aspects of our myth, what aspects of our culture we should be preserving for the sake of our own identity, our own cultural identity, and what aspect of science, what aspects of Western ideology, what aspect of Western materialism we should be imbibing so as to make our culture, economy, and nation much more stronger than it already is. Something so when we make a balance between the two, that is only when we will be able to think in terms of a sustainable development, and that is what we should be looking at. And it is with this hope that we probably will be able to do a sustainable development of our own nation and that thereby the whole of the world, that today I would like to end my talk. If you have any questions, queries, observations to make, or any further additions to whatever I have said, you are most welcome.
Thank you, sir, for an insightful lecture. Dear participants, the session is open to question. Please post if you have any.
If you have any questions, please, or any observations even, or any addition to whatever I have said. Probably you have read something else which may be talking about something similar to this, what we have been discussing.
Sir, as always, your lecture was very lucid, and our participants are both thrilled and well satisfied with it. And moving further, I would like to invite Dr. H.M. Arif, Head, Department of Languages and Chairperson IFDP, to acknowledge Sir for his consent to our program.
A very good afternoon, sir.
Thank you. Good afternoon. Thank you very much for giving the opportunity to be a
Nice
part
to
of your
thank
part
you.
of this
Nice,
FDP.
very nice meeting you, sir. Uh,
Same here.
I'm really very, very impressed with the thought you presented, the insight you shared. After all, we all know that the song you played, just like सफीना चाहिए इस बहरे बेकरां के लिए सफीना चाहिए इस बहरे बेकरां के लिए so really we are first of all I would like to thank uh, Dr. Arina Nazneen, Dr. Vania, the most important, and I think I would rather say the pillar of the this organizing this IFDP. Actually, they are leaving no stone unturned to make it a successful event. So first of all, I would like to appreciate, to acknowledge the efforts they made. And sir, this is the Department of Languages, and I have been serving the Department of Languages to promote the cause of literature. And in order to promote the cause of literature, I think your lecture, your thoughts would really benefiting all the participants, sir. So my words of appreciation, I for you, I think just like tiny words for a giant personality. So you are the great personality, sir. You are honored and you are the great speaker of the day. So I sincerely thank you, sir, for giving your precious time for the department and for the event. And I would like also uh, offer my humble words of appreciation to our participants who have been taking part actively, showing their great interest. And so uh, I would like to invite in future also you to share your ideas with us. And
Thank you, Professor
I am
Arif, for your appreciation.
thank you. Okay, okay. So thank you, sir. Thank you, sir. And now I am giving the mic to Dr. Arena to purpose word of thanks. Thank you, sir. Again, thank you, sir.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
So, meanwhile, we have one question. If you can just address it, it is being displayed on the screen.
Yeah, there is somebody asking, Anita Pal is asking if there's a comparative study with Amitav Ghosh that can be done on this. There are many authors that that deal with this. You find out that about Uttarakhand, there is this particular lady, Anuradha something. I forgot the name. She also is writing novels regarding the regarding this ecological issues in the Uttarakhand area. I forgot name of the author right now. So you can deal with this. So there are many authors those who have been doing on writing on on this scale. Like even when we read this poem by Jeev Patel on killing a tree, it also is something that is doing talking in terms of environmental impact and sustainability. It's not that like even if we go back to Kalidasa, Avigan Shakuntalam is one of the texts which talks about environmentalism, which talks about living, cohabiting with nature, and which talks in terms of how the most educated, which is the Munis and Rishis, they used to go and live with nature, live amongst the forest for the sake of knowledge. So the forest area is area of egalitarian beliefs. Forest is area of knowledge. Forest is area where one finds one own soul. So that is something which has been explored in the Indian society, culture and literature for a long period of time. So there are no dearth of authors those who try to talk in terms of environment and cohabiting with environment in the Indian context. So you can even Tagore does it. Even Tagore does it very beautifully in almost in all the short stories and novels. So you can even take up Tagore. Probably there are many regional authors. Regional authors, by that I mean that authors writing in different Indian languages deal with this. There are many northeastern poets, those who are trying to talk about environmental impact, environmentalism. So you can even try to make a comparative study with the northeastern poets that are there. So I think if you explore this, this particular area, there will be no dearth of the poets and writers, those are trying to deal with this notion of ecology or environment or sustainable development. Okay, any further things?
Thank you, sir. And now I would like to invite Dr. Arina Nazneen, convener IFDP, to propose vote of thanks.
Thank you, Vanya. As we express our gratitude, we must never forget that the highest appreciation is not to utter words, but to live by them. And so we really live the moment with you. I feel honored and privileged to get the opportunity to propose a vote of thanks for such a philosophical session. Thank you, sir.
Thank
I'm
you very
Dr.
much.
Arina on the behalf of the.
Thank you.
Sure, sir.
Thank you, Dr. Nanjin.
Pleasure is all mine, sir. I am Dr. Arina on the behalf of the organizing committee of the Department of Languages, Integral University. I convey deep regards and hearty thanks to our eminent speaker of the day, Professor Dulal Halder, Department of English, University of Delhi. So, your stimulating ideas on the topic environmental sustainability with mythical overtones, a study of Amitav Ghosh, recent work, and your ideas about the interactive relationship between human and nature. This relationship throws light upon the study of ecology and eco-critical reading is remarkable. You have touched on the most sensitive aspect of human life and literature. We are really grateful for your humble academic initiative. It is a privilege to propose a vote of thanks and acknowledge the contribution of all those who have worked hard to make this event a grand success. I lack I lack words of appreciation for our participants who set the wheels rolling day to day with their attentiveness to the lectures. They share our responsibility for the effective running of the session. Through this platform, I want to express my sincere gratitude to each and everyone who cooperated with the accomplishment of this task. We have been fortunate enough to be backed by a team of very motivated and dedicated colleagues. Once again, thank you, sir, for your cooperation and support that you excel for this International Faculty Development Program. As always, with your eminent presence, we are very happy and we are bestowed. Thank you, sir. Thank
Thank
you,
you. Thank you very
everyone.
much.
Pleasure is all mine, sir.
Thank you.